Sydney's Powerhouse Museum has existed in some form for over 125 years, and it houses over 500,000 objects, one of which being Sydney and New South Wales' first steam locomotive. As at the time of this video, the museum will close its doors for an extended period of time. Let's take one last look at our railway's history and Loco No. 1 before the doors are closed. Locomotive No. 1 was built by Robertson Stephenson & Co. in Newcastle upon Tyne in England, and was designed by James Edward McConnell of the London and North Western Railway. It was built in 1854 and is of an 042 wheel arrangement. It has a tractive effort of 8,900 pounds per square foot, and its valve gear is of a Stephenson slide type. Here we can see Locomotive No. 1 being unloaded at West Circular Quay. It was then hauled to the railway line on a special wagon drawn by 20 horses. After arriving by ship from England, it was assembled and hauled ballast trains of broken stone to build the first railways. Trips for the governor, railway commissioners, directors and workers followed, all before the official opening on the 26th of September 1855. It then hauled the first passenger train on the line to Long Cove Viaduct at Lewisham. Locomotive No. 1 pulled goods and passenger trains between Sydney, Campbelltown, Richmond and Penrith. Crews on early steam locomotives were exposed to all weather, riding on the open footplate. In 1865 a curved corrugated iron roof was provided, which gave a little protection from the heat and rain. It was the first locomotive involved in a recorded accident with passengers in July of 1858. In 1877, after only 22 years, it was withdrawn from service and replaced with a lighter locomotive. In 1884, Locomotive No. 1 was given to the Powerhouse Museum by the New South Wales Commissioner of Railways. It is very rare for a country to retain its first locomotive, as most were scrapped. This makes Locomotive No. 1 one of the most historically significant objects in New South Wales. It has been part of the Powerhouse Museum's collection for over 130 years. In 1884 it was put on display for the first time in the Agricultural Hall in the Domain, where the timber floor sagged under the weight. In 1893 Locomotive No. 1 was moved to the purpose-built engine house at the rear of the old museum building in Harris Street, Ultimo. It was conserved in 1980 and was displayed in Stage 1 of the Powerhouse from 1981. Although it has been a museum exhibit since 1884, Locomotive No. 1 has been out on public display on special occasions: the 50th anniversary of the railways in 1905, a special railways display in 1917, and the centenary of the railways in 1955. On each occasion, moving the locomotive was a massive undertaking, requiring huge teams of horses, humans and machines. Locomotive No. 1's last outing was its transfer in 1987 to its location at the Powerhouse Museum, where it is today, using air skates. The locomotive's first driver was William Sixsmith, who began driving steam engines in England in the 1830s. It was gold, not railways, that brought him to Australia and the Victorian diggings. In 1855, when his luck failed, Sixsmith returned to Sydney and landed the top job of driving Locomotive No. 1. Sixsmith became the railway's most senior driver, skillful, safe and always reliable. He retired in 1885 at the age of 70 and died in 1893, and was buried in Rookwood Cemetery, not far from the railway line where it all began. After the locomotive was decommissioned, its tender was saved and reused. It was fitted with new bunkers and hoppers and used with Locomotive No. 78. In 1938, the tender was set aside for the museum to display with Locomotive No. 1. The tender's capacity is for coal 4 tonnes and water 2,000 gallons or 9,000 litres. William Webster was the first fireman on the locomotive. He was 21 at the time of the railway opening in 1855 and rose to the position of locomotive inspector at Goulburn. At first, wood was used for the fuel, but it burnt too quickly and was a bushfire hazard. Also, daily complaints from passengers of their clothing being damaged by sparks led to the decision in 1861 to convert the locomotives to coal burning. We see here English carriage building firm Joseph Wright and Sons. They began building road coaches and changed to railway carriages. By the 1850s they were supplying overseas railways, not only Australia but also Bulgaria, Chile, Denmark, India, Norway, Paraguay, Spain and Sweden. Although it has been greatly altered, the first-class carriage is one of the last surviving carriages from the 1850s, built by the famous English carriage building firm of Joseph Wright and Sons. It was originally built as a third class for the Great Northern Railway, the second railway in New South Wales from Newcastle to Maitland in 1857. The carriage was rebuilt as a second class in 1863 and altered again in 1909 to workman's van W363. It was discovered still in use as a workman's van in 1968 at Casino in northern New South Wales. The van was rebuilt by Railways apprentices as a first-class carriage to complete Locomotive No.1's display at the Powerhouse Museum. First-class passengers were offered padded seats, carpets, lamps and windows with shutters, but they still had a bumpy and drafty ride. A double-layered roof helped keep the carriage cool, and footboards ran the full length of the carriages. Lighting was Spartan because it was felt that there would be little call for travel after dark. Converted carriages were sometimes used as workmen's vans after they went out of service. The vans were hauled to country depots and used as inexpensive mobile accommodation for railway workers. This historic second-class carriage was found in 1961. It was fitted with a bed, a Metters stove and shelving for personal effects and tools. The historic second-class carriage was originally number 6 of the first 12 second-class carriages ordered for the 1855 Sydney to Parramatta line and ran on the first day of the new railway's operation. Built by Joseph Wright and Sons in 1854, it was converted into a workman's van, W730, in 1890. It was saved from being scrapped by the railway's archivist, John Forsyth, who discovered it derelict in Newcastle in 1961. Apprentices at the Clyde Railway Workshops restored it between 1965 and 1967. Although there is debate in railway circles about its authenticity, the third-class carriage is believed to be number 2 of the original 12 third-class carriages built in 1854 by British firm Joseph Wright and Sons for the first railways of New South Wales. It was converted to a workman's sleeping van, WSV6, in 1890 and restored for the Powerhouse Museum by apprentices at Everleigh's Carriage Workshops in 1947 and then repainted in 1980. The demand for third-class travel was so great that by the time the class was abolished in 1863, there were 36 carriages in use. These were renamed second class. Travelling conditions in third class were basic. The hard bench seats were backless and there were no glass in the windows, so passengers were exposed to smoke and soot. Benches are arranged to accommodate the maximum number of passengers, 18 in each of the 2 compartments. It was a vast improvement on travel over rough and dusty roads in vehicles such as mail coaches, open carriages and wagons. New South Wales railways of this time also saw other rolling stock for horses and carriages. The first order of rolling stock for the Sydney Railway included 8 first class, 12 second class and 12 third class carriages. There were also open goods trucks, luggage brake vans and cattle and sheep trucks. Carriage trucks conveyed the carriages of wealthy Sydney citizens while their horses travelled in horse boxes shown here. Sitting under the signal box on the main hall sits steam locomotive 1243. 1243 was built in 1882 by Atlas Engineering and served as an express passenger loco and mail mainline loco. In 1958 it was preserved. In 1970 it starred in the movie Ned Kelly in green livery, and then in 1987 it was preserved again returned back to its black livery and became a permanent display at the Powerhouse Museum. Also under the signal box sits the Governor-General's carriage, built in 1891 and donated to the museum in 1992. Dominating the floor is Central Station's indicator board. Built in 1906 and replaced by 20 television monitors in 1992, it was reluctantly donated to the museum after some repairs. So what awaits the Powerhouse Museum as it closes for its extensive refurbishment? It's estimated to close for 3 years, but it could be longer. What will happen to our railway history? Only time will tell. If you liked that video, why not check out this one? Until next time, remember, sometimes the wrong train can take you to the right place.